Today, we are having a second time guest on the show who joined us last time to talk about what he and his team deemed NFTs 2.0. We got an update on what's going on with their project, as well as some of the devastating effects that social engineering has had on the NFT ecosystem as a whole, and also how Remark is making a positive impact not only on the metaverse, but the real world as well. So let's jump right in. Hi there, and welcome to Kraken's Parachain Auctions podcast. I'm your host, Brian Hoffman, and on this show, you'll hear from leaders and innovators around the world building on Polkadot and Kusama. Now, whether this is the first you've heard of parachains or you're a DeFi aficionado, come with us behind the scenes as we explore the technology of the future today. So today we have with us Bruno Škvorc, the founder of Remark. Welcome back to the show, Bruno. It's been a minute.
Thank you. Indeed. Good to be back.
Yeah, so a lot has happened since the last time we had you on the podcast, and I'd love to get through as much as we can. It's probably 4 or 5 podcasts worth of content for our listeners to wade through. I was actually before we recorded this, I was going through some of the announcements and things that you guys have done in the past, just to kind of refresh my memory on what's happened over the last few months, and it's pretty remarkable, you could say, pardon the pun. But, just real quick, since it has been quite a bit of time since we did the last show, maybe you could just explain a little bit about what Remark is, what you guys are trying to accomplish with that project.
Yep. What we've set out to do is just build NFTs on Kusama, which didn't have the technical ability to host NFTs, but what it evolved into is a set of NFT standards that basically allow you to very easily build extremely advanced NFT projects that can evolve over time, contain each other, and serve as, like a basis for really advanced things that are not possible elsewhere. With the kind of overarching goal being, let's give .sama in general the ability to leapfrog whatever NFT technology exists on Ethereum by a few generations, rather than limping behind it and trying to catch up, as most of these contenders do. So, what we have with Remark now is the most advanced set of NFT standards in the ecosystem in general, and people are starting to wake up to it.
Yeah, and the last time we spoke, we discussed a lot about like kind of the difference between kind of this ERC 720 and standard and what you guys are building, and how much more flexible and expansive the world you can kind of create with your NFTs is. But I still think that there is this weird like kind of gravitational pull towards that market because it's just the first and the biggest at the moment. And you guys have also started to do some work, I believe, with like Moonbeam or Moon River and that group, and who are constructing an EVM on top of Polkadot and Kusama. How has it been? How has it been working? Still closely with the kind of the EVM technology, but like incorporating what you guys are doing. Has that been a challenge, or do you guys see it as very complementary?
It is a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. The complexity of the standards that we've built does not very easily translate to EVM. It's very difficult to write this code as contracts that are reusable and still customizable enough, but it's even harder to make them safe. And with all the other functionality that we have in these generic Lego building blocks for NFTs 2.0, each of those can be a hidden trapdoor with crocodiles behind it. It's very, very risky to let this out into the wild without proper documentation, plenty of warnings, and everything else. In many ways, we are delivering the blueprints for a nuclear weapon to the general public and hoping for the best. In an attempt to see people build nuclear reactors instead of nuclear weapons. This is like, it's definitely a challenge. It's a fun challenge. It's exciting, and it's really kind of inspiring to see what our developers are coming up with and what people want to build as we are approached by more and more projects. But it is definitely hard and definitely very, very dangerous. There's definitely a huge kind of like really obvious difference when you compare our Rust implementation that is intended for integration with parachains versus the EVM implementation, which is a set of smart contracts that will just go on an EVM. The attack surface is so much lower, so much smaller in the Rust version that it's really an order of magnitude, I would say.
So you guys are doing a lot of work like deep in the protocol and like really thinking about the mechanics of how all this stuff works. And I think for the most part, mainstream audiences who aren't like really deep in the developer communities, what they see is like all these like big collaborations, partnerships. They're hearing, Bored Ape movies are coming out or whatever. And that's kind of their exposure to NFTs. I mean, how do you guys think about promoting what you are building versus like all this marketing hype that's kind of coming in? I mean, it's like Kraft macaroni and cheese and Snickers bars on the metaverse, and it's like this overwhelming, like can't sort out what the nonsense is. But you guys are building something like really like advanced. So how do you stay fresh in people's mind? Like, how are you promoting all of this technology when you have all that noise going on?
That is the $1 million question. We have admittedly failed at marketing this to the wider audience because it is basically unmarketable. In the same way, you don't really market Linux to people. You just build stuff on it and then sell them the end product. We just have technology that takes a ton of effort to understand. We try to make it easy and friendly with good UX, with a good application on top, with a good NFT marketplace, with a game that will be extremely approachable to people and which will not bombard them with jargon and wallets and seed phrases and whatnot. With building music NFT infrastructure that makes sense from a drag and drop, click and point and click, perspective. But at the end of the day, it is all a very big marketing machine, the entire crypto space. And so the Bored Apes and Snickers and Nike shoes will always carry much more weight, purely because you know the duffel bags of their are much fuller of cash than ours are, and they're much more professional at this marketing exposure. This is ultimately what people care about. They care about familiarity. They care about hearing about brands that they are familiar with, and they respond to that. So we didn't necessarily focus on that. We have a small but extremely passionate community of builders around us, and now the next step of the challenge is simply making this as approachable to the masses as possible. And this is where our products on top of Remark will hopefully come in handy and change the landscape.
So you mentioned the marketplace that you guys have built. I think it's kind of timely because today we saw that Coinbase announced their like beta for their big marketplace that they've been hyping for quite a while. And we've seen FTX try to attempt to do something, and Binance, and obviously we have the big gorilla in the room, which is OpenSea. But after observing those marketplaces and seeing what they've done well and what they haven't done well, how does that impact how you think about the marketplace that you guys are building? And are there things that you've taken from that you were surprised worked, or do you see them as being kind of inferior over the long term? Do you see something more substantial coming?
Um, they are essentially copies of each other. There's not much you can innovate on when you're stuck in ERC 721 world. They're all selling links to media, and there's only so much you can do when selling links to media. So Coinbase can come out with their own marketplace, which replaces user wallets with usernames and passwords, or maybe allows credit card purchases of NFTs, which is admittedly a huge UX boost and a massive barrier removed. But ultimately, it all comes down to trading links to pictures. So there's going to be these vampire attacks like we've seen with LuxRare and X2Y2 going after OpenSea with literally giving people tokens to use their platforms instead of OpenSea, which is always a short-term success, as we've seen in DeFi. But it's there's a maximum of features you can add to these basically Web2 apps that are selling NFTs. there's these plagiarism detections, there's subscriptions, there's offers, there's different auction types and so on. But ultimately, if you give them enough time, they will all converge on the exact same feature set, because there is an end to that technology tree. They will reach the end, and there's no way to go any further. The way to go further is to move away from ERC 721. So while we do appreciate and envy the excellent UX at some of these marketplaces, and they do have features that we really want but can't build right now, like escrowed offers for NFTs. They are very much in this tortoise versus hare position, where they are the hare who ran ahead and will fall asleep under a tree while we slowly outbuild them. And the only reason we can do this is because we are not in ERC 721. So it's kind of like, we take a lot of inspiration from others. We learn a lot. We've made some mistakes based on that. So we've tried to replicate the functionality that people are familiar with, and made mistakes in that, because by the virtue of our standards doing so much more, people actually fell into some UX traps and did some very expensive mistakes, because our stuff does so much more and we did not add enough protections in there, assuming that they would have this knowledge, and they do not. So we've learned from our own mistakes, we've learned from their mistakes, but ultimately we will completely diverge in functionality that we have, and that's all right. We hope that these incumbents, these huge marketplaces, will eventually realize the advantage of supporting more advanced standards, and that they will opt to support it, and that we will be able to partner up with everybody essentially, and just evolve the NFT space for blockchains.
So it sounds like maybe they haven't already, but I was curious, have any of these kind of legacy marketplaces reached out to you guys, or like have you had anybody like feel around and ask questions about what you're doing to explore how they might incorporate what you're doing into the work that they're doing?
Not on the Ethereum end. From the Ethereum mainnet, not so much, which economically makes sense. There's far too much money in ERC 721s right now to even bother with anything else. And as long as there's OpenSea to compete with, the pie is big enough to compete on the ERC 721 ground. When that dries up a little, I expect we'll hear much more from them, and as we continue growing. But until now, no. From the Ethereum mainnet side, no.
You compared what you guys are doing, sort of, you used the analogy of like kind of the whole Windows and Linux winning out. The part of the reason why Linux ended up winning is because, developers just they wanted open source, they wanted flexibility, they wanted more control over what was going on, they wanted it to be cheaper. What would you say are like the defining features of Remark that would kind of compare there? Like, what would draw them off of the Windows of NFTs? The Ethereum juggernaut. What is special about Remark?
Just purely the fact that your NFTs can grow in value over time. Mm-hmm. Every time you interact with an NFT on Remark, you come away with a slightly more valuable NFT. Because your NFT evolves with you. Then this is especially the case in game-like environments, where you don't get unrelated, unconnected airdrops next to a main NFT you already have. Like, you have a Bored Ape, and then you will get a 3D Ape NFT, and then you will get a 3D Ape's hat as an NFT. So you end up with a bunch of junk in your wallet that still requires a centralized game to use those assets. Mm-hmm. Instead, you can have an avatar that is an NFT that has accessories inside of itself that it can still trade globally with any other avatar of any other game or metaverse respecting the Remark standard. And also it can have its own soft skills represented as NFTs. So you can think of the NFT avatar as having a brain that is an NFT, and into that brain you can install crafting recipes or personalities, and those are all non-transferable NFTs. And as the avatar, gains some experience, does something in a metaverse, their experience card NFT can actually grow, can collect these experience points and evolve with you. So literally every time you log out, your avatar, your NFT avatar, is a little bit more valuable, and you keep that experience. It doesn't disappear when the server shuts down. So that's one example. But the other one is just the ability to have one NFT compatible with an infinity of other collections, regardless of chain or whoever who made them, is entirely priceless. If you think about the current landscape of NFTs, where you have like I don't know 10,000 cockroaches and five of them have sneakers, and so then you have a rarity of 5 in 10,000 for sneakers, and so now the sneakers are really rare and everybody wants the roaches and sneakers. Um, that works in ERC 721, but with Remark, that's all turned upside down because these sneakers are unequipable. And they're not just unequipable, they're individually sellable as NFTs. So they're just a separate NFT that happens to be compatible with the cockroach. And now, if I launch a collection of pandas that can also wear these sneakers, and there's 20,000 pandas, these sneakers no longer have a rarity of 5 in 10,000. They have a rarity of 5 in 30,000. And so you have this concept of a global item economy that you can expand across the entire remark spectrum long into the future. Your items do not die with the death of your project. They can be expanded, they can be added, the utility can be added to them ad infinitum, and it can be made compatible with future collections. And so you have this concept of a dynamic rarity score, where the more things something is compatible with, the more valuable it is because there's more demand for it. It can be
Mm-hmm.
fitted into more things. So the rarity is completely different in this case. And this doesn't just apply to accessories like PFPs or games. You can have a music track that has a slot for drums and vocals and synth and whatever. And so you can equip drums into that music slot, into that, so you end up with a collaborative music composition. That's really cool. And the music, every time the song is sold, it can distribute royalties to everybody who contributed. Fine, very cool. But also, this one, let's say, drum track that I built, it can be made compatible with these music NFTs. But I can also make it compatible with, say, a plot of land in our Skybreach metaverse. And if I equip it into the plot of land, it can become a background soundtrack when your avatar is in that plot of land. And so now a piece of music is not just compatible with a predefined set of music NFTs, it is also compatible with a metaverse piece of land. And now its rarity is no longer the number of music NFTs it can be equipped into, but also the number of lands it can be equipped into. And so you can see here how different types of different NFTs become compatible with other types of other NFTs in completely unrelated collections. So this is something that people have justifiably trouble wrapping their heads around, and we have equally as much trouble communicating that because it's so far removed from what current NFTs are. But the experiments that we're seeing already are very, very encouraging.
Yeah, it's interesting how you explain that because I think what we see right now in the majority of NFT marketplaces is really they're kind of just like glorified trading cards. You know, they have
Yeah,
like a very fixed rarity. There's a set, and there's only so many, and you just trade them back and forth essentially. Whereas what you're describing is almost more like we found some kind of precious mineral, and then we're discovering additional use cases as time goes on that which kind of increase demand or perhaps it goes the other direction. Maybe things get destroyed and it becomes less valuable over time. But
exactly.
it's a little bit more organic how that rarity or that value is generated. Which I mean, in my opinion, it sounds like my hypothesis there would be that that would create a much more it would create an experience more focused on experiential events rather than like just like manufactured hype and kind of it's everything that most people in crypto don't really like that much, which is that just like pumping and dumping and just really what does it cost, what can I buy and sell it
Yeah,
for.
yeah,
I think when people realize that there's some kind of intrinsic value there that goes beyond that, it would be really exciting to see that happen. Now, admittedly, and you kind of hinted at that, is like I don't think we've hit that inflection point where people are like their brains have expanded yet to really embrace the metaverse. I personally don't think it's going to be Mark Zuckerberg that does it, but perhaps it's projects like yours that are actually really do define what truly is the metaverse. And you kind of touched on this, but maybe you could explain what Skybreach is. I know you guys have like a lot of stuff online about this, but if you could explain
yeah.
it, it'd be great.
So Skybreach is our attempt at putting all the Remark NFT 2.0 Legos to work. And building the first decentralized metaverse. Every other metaverse out there right now is just a multiplayer game running on AWS that has replaced usernames and passwords with NFTs to log in. And that's cool, but this is not the metaverse. The metaverse is a virtual online experience where reasonably unique avatars of human beings can interact with each other and keep that experience with them. It's not a multiplayer game that disappears with your experience once the servers go down. And so, with traditional metaverses right now, you can just log into as many as you want, into as many copies as you want. No, nothing happens because literally you're just using your wallet as a login method. You can sell the NFT while you're playing. Nothing happens because you're not actually using the NFT. You were just allowed by the game client to use a 3D asset in the game because you have it in your wallet at the time of login.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. With Skybreach, what we're trying to do is we're trying to combine all the remark logic into just really pushing a truly decentralized metaverse in that you will own your experience, your avatar will grow over time, you will be able to take it into any other metaverse that follows the same standard, but you will have the long promised digital scarcity of NFTs actually realized. Because if you send your avatar into a piece of land, you have sent that avatar into the piece of land. And that avatar, by definition, cannot be anywhere else. It cannot be in another metaverse's piece of land because that land contains that avatar. So it's physically in it. And this provides the real digital scarcity promised by NFTs that it should really communicate. And also the true metaverse experience where you are guaranteed to be there. And another aspect is just the decentralization of it all. By keeping it all on chain and even the backend processing in the fog computing model of our partners, Fala, we are basically, hopefully, developing the only metaverse that cannot be taken offline. Everything is going to be on chain. Everything's going to be processed. All the state is going to be processed on chain because our NFTs allow it, because you know where your character is, what it does, what it contains, and so on. If the metaverse somehow shuts down, your avatar still has all of this experience, knowledge, gear, resources. Everything is in the NFT itself. And everything can be reused in any other game in the future by us or by somebody else. Additionally, there's a concept of world governance, which means that the players of the game will essentially be voting on changes to the game. So, to cut a long story short, in 2 years, we hope to be completely hands off. We hope to completely abandon Skybreach and leave it in the hands of the community and become players with them. What happens then? Nobody knows. Maybe everything breaks because the community are monsters. Or maybe we end up with the best experiment ever created. In any case, it's going to be something really interesting and something that I want to see evolve on its own in this really exciting way where there's no centralized team or corporation or company behind it driving the decisions, building the DLCs and pushing drops or whatever else. So Skybridge is basically a decentralized metaverse that is essentially community governed by everybody who has the NFTs that were voted in as the governors of the world.
Yeah, I really like the way you described the metaverse versus what we currently have. I think it kind of highlights how difficult it is for everybody to wrap their heads around what the metaverse is. Like, I think people see these ads, like Facebook did, where they show like it just looks like you're playing in VR, like we've had for years, where you're
Mm-hmm.
just sitting in a room virtually with people and talking and playing games. But like ultimately, that's just a game server somewhere, right? Like you
Yep.
said in AWS, it doesn't really incorporate like a lot of what metaverse really means or should mean. Um, that's a little bit more like it's something you have to think about really hard in your brain, like the concept that game still exists if you're not in it. Like if the players are not in the server, does the universe still exist? If it's on chain, it kind of does. Like, just because you turn off your computer, your Bitcoin wallet doesn't go away, right? Like
Yep.
it just is there. And the idea that like you're just kind of creating key-based authentication, which is essentially what it is, right? Like
Yeah,
you sign a message proving you own an NFT, and like you're in the club, you get to join. It doesn't really reflect well, and I think for gaming to really evolve, if you have all these weapons and you go into a game and you're playing and then you dump them all somewhere else and you're just like going ahead and playing with it, it's like, what did that even mean to sell those items? Once again, it goes back to like all it was about money and a transaction. It had nothing to do with the games or your interactions with other players.
yeah.
So um so I think it's a pretty uh stark difference between what you guys are kind of envisioning and what we're dealing with today. Speaking of authentication, I did want to kind of quickly touch on some of the things that we've seen recently around security and NFTs. And admittedly, a lot of this is probably, you hear big headlines about security breaches or whatever. Somebody loses all their NFTs, and you wonder, was it because they're dummies and didn't control their email account properly, or was it actually a defect within the blockchain or NFTs themselves? What are some of the things that you've seen that are potentially problematic for Remark and Polkadot and Kusama, or have you been impressed with how it's gone so far?
Whew, yeah. I mean, it's easy to get carried away. Sometimes people will smooth talk you into a lot of different things, and you might be susceptible to it when you've had 2 years of 18-hour workdays without stopping. So it happens. You can fall for phishing. You can fall for social engineering. Just recently, one of our former community admins was literally groomed for 2 weeks, offered a job, added to professionally created Slack teams. Everything was there. The team was there. Technology was there, all in the effort of finally sending her one link that resulted in her Discord session being hijacked. And in that instant, a bot posted a phishing link in all the Discords that she was admin in. And it worked. So it's really difficult to avoid these problems when you're not careful, when you don't do due diligence, and even then it's very difficult. I don't know how to fight that other than with education and people paying expensive lessons. We all did, and we will continue to pay them. In terms of technology, it's chain wise, it's all safe unless you're developing on something like, I don't know, Solana or on a Binance Smart Chain. But the real problem is, and that is the thing that worries me in the EVM implementation, is the sneaky backdoors in the various contracts. So in Ethereum right now, you have just a link to an image, and the only thing you can do with it is send it to somebody or burn it. Mm-hmm. And usually when you get spam NFTs, you don't care. You hide them in any UI that you use to look at NFTs, and that's the end of the story. Sometimes you burn them. That's usually a mistake, because behind the burn function, there can be a ninja function that will just approve something else or send an NFT that's actually valuable from your wallet to the hacker. And so this is a trap. Now, the trap is so much more dire in Remark. Because in Remark, you have contracts, you have NFTs that can own other NFTs. Therefore, you have contracts that can send other NFTs around. You have on-chain emotes where you can send literally social reactions to NFTs. You have NFTs that can burn other NFTs to activate some certain function, like drink a potion or crack a gem to let a genie out or whatever. You have NFTs that have multiple resources, which can be accepted or denied by the owner of the NFT. So a different resource is like a different representation of the same NFT, a different visual output or audio output or something, depending on the context it's being loaded in. It's like an NFT with those four faces that rotate. Just depends on the perspective you look at it from. So there's a lot of interactions you can do with NFTs, and every interaction can hide such a trapdoor. So it is going to be a very difficult battle to fight scams in this regard, especially because you have to read the code. find the trapdoors. So the first thing we're going to do when EVM is live, we will have an auditing service that will help with this, and we will also try to find as many auditing companies to assist with this as possible, so that we can actually give some sort of check of approval to certain collections, and guarantee that we will refund any losses if they happen because of these. So this is one way to kind of alleviate the problem. Training users is another thing we can do. Just exercising utmost care, putting in massive blockers in the UIs, putting in warnings and pop-ups and everything. But it is going to be an uphill battle, and we will try to fight it with good UX. So block anything suspicious by default. Go for a strict whitelist approach, and hope for the best. We'll see. One thing that I'm very disappointed in how it turned out in Kusama is the Ledger support. So it's quite the struggle to use Ledger in Kusama in general. And so many people just opt to have hot wallets. And this is also a recipe for disaster. Luckily, there are locking mechanics with people's staking accounts and so on. So not everybody has their funds immediately available. So even if they get compromised, there's very little that the hacker can do. Just yesterday, somebody contacted me thinking that I got that my collator on Moonriver, for example, I'm running a collator, and the stake behind it was reduced. And one guy messaged me and saying like, were we slashed or something, that the mover is gone. And I told him there's no slashing on Moonriver. And so it turned out that his wallet was compromised, and they drained his MetaMask out of his mover. So it's always it's always an arms race. We will try our best, but yeah, we already expect to lose some battles, win others, and just improve through that.
Yeah, NFTs are pretty unique in that 5-6 years ago, if somebody had a breach, let's say on some app, and they lost 3 Bitcoin, we could just recoup a fungible token right back to them, give them 3 Bitcoin, and they would never know the difference. At this point, you're talking about Bored Apes or something that are worth some massive amount of ETH, and yeah, you could give them back their ETH if they lost it or something. But these are like unique collectibles. I mean, you can't once they've swept all your like hard fought for NFTs, they're gone, and it's like not as easy to kind of fix that for people. The other thing here is, you talked about hardware wallets like cold wallets and hot wallets. Like a lot of people think of, they don't need $1 million in their hot wallet. They have the $5 million worth of crypto. They have maybe some spending money in a hot wallet, and the rest of it is just tucked away for good. But if you have $1 million worth of NFTs, there may be some reason you need to have them accessible to games or to whatever community experiences they're coming up with for all these different projects. Perhaps you can't even participate unless you have access to them, and they can't be on those devices, or they don't even think of them like that. They have so much more utility that it's you don't think of it as something you just sock away and store for a rainy day. So definitely different UX challenges. The experience that your colleague had, that's completely bonkers that people go through so much trouble to get to people. But it happens, right? It happens all the time. It's often the things we don't think about that get to us. It's hard to design complex systems as well with like short up security. So I'm sure you guys have like a much bigger attack surface than some other ERC 20 or sorry, ERC 721 projects, because there's just such a limited functionality there. But it sounds like you guys are doing audits and everything else. So that's really great to hear.
We will be. So this is still in production, in development. So as we polish things, then we will start by very slowly introducing this to the public and just being super careful about it.
Definitely. Do you guys have people reporting security issues to you guys
We do
pretty
from time to
consistently?
time, but
Yeah.
this the EVM implementation is not in production yet, so
Hmm.
we didn't really expose it to many people. The people who are exposed to the implementation also work on it mainly. So we do get we iterate there in those channels, and then once we have the basics out. As agreed by this, like we have this Moonbeam grant to deploy the contracts on Moonriver. Um, Once that's out and people start experimenting, we expect to see a lot of different, bug reports and whatever issues people will come up with. Um, we will, like clearly mark it as beta, as in testing mode, unaudited and everything. And then once we get some feedback, improve it, then we'll lay down the money for the audit and see that this is done properly.
So something we didn't touch on, but I think we discussed a little bit last podcast was the fact that you guys aren't technically a blockchain. You ride on top of a blockchain. So maybe you can describe a little bit of the difference between perhaps other NFT projects. Like how does that work exactly? Can you explain the dynamic there?
So the current implementation of Remark is a hack on Kusama. If you think of blocks like shipping containers on a cargo ship, we do not put anything into the containers. Instead, we graffiti the outside of the containers. And we have a special language interpreter called the remark specification that can look at these graffiti and figure out what they mean. So these graffiti are actually our NFTs, and the special language interpreter kind of compiles them and produces like a final ledger, a final, book of accounts of who has which NFT and what that NFT represents. So it's basically a hack on the Kusama blockchain. This is being retired. It's been feature frozen now for a month or so. And we are fully moving to the EVM and the Rust version. So simultaneously, we'll be deploying these two new infras for Remark. One is for the chains that don't have an EVM engine inside and want to have advanced NFTs. The other is for EVM chains in general, inside and outside of the Sama ecosystem. So these are going to be the like canonical chain deployments, no longer a hack. But right now we're still largely running on the hack version.
It's interesting. It's such a parallel for anybody who was in Bitcoin, for a long time. It reminds me of back when everybody started hacking op return to try and put arbitrary data into the blockchain and use that as kind of like metadata for things off chain. And it seemed very complex at the time, but things have like evolved so much, beyond that concept. But it all leads back to like scaling up blockchains and like figuring out like what do we do with all this data that doesn't necessarily need to be in the cargo containers as you kind of described. I'd love to shift gears real quick and talk about something that I think is pretty cool that you guys are doing, which is this work you're doing to support RMTerra, which I won't even try to pronounce that in Brazil in Portuguese, but it's a reforestation effort, as far as I understand. And you guys have a product called Moonglade that's dedicated to support that. So maybe you could explain why you guys decided to do this and what it is exactly.
Yeah, sure. We try to launch projects that have some sort of common good element from time to time, and two things make sense. One is the Russian-Ukraine war, which we've just assisted with the statue auction. We auctioned off some Canaria statues and collected 200K or so USD for that. And the other one is the Moonglade project, which is focusing on just essentially there's a lot of fires in Portugal, and they those are absolutely insane California level fires. So these produce nothing but barren land for hectares and hectares. And the RM Terra project is using this land to, so the land burned because of eucalyptus plantings. That was, these trees were kind of immigrated there, and they're not native to the ecosystem, and they burn like hell. And once one catches fire, everything else catches fire. If you don't replant that, so it takes like 4 years for a forest to regrow, and if it does, untouched, it'll grow the same things. So you gotta get rid of the monoculture that's harming the entire situation, which is the eucalyptus, and replace it with something productive. In this case, RMTerra, what they're doing is they're basically planting food trees and fire barrier trees into these once eucalyptus lands. So what you get is basically fireproof forests of free food. And this is not like a carbon removal or something effort. The carbon effect of apple trees is negligible, but it's negligible in terms of how much carbon they take from the atmosphere. But it's far more effective if you look at it from the perspective of saving on food production, food transport, pesticides, and everything else. It's actually being like sustainable agriculture that will add diversity to the land and keep it fertile, while also protecting it from fires and feeding the people that live there for free. And so this is the effort that we're doing. The Moonglade project is basically every tree that is planted gets its own representation as an NFT. Every single tree is tagged, and you can find these tags. If you go there in the wild, they're tagged. And we hired this great artist, Masho, from Georgia, to draw these elements of trees that we put together into really funky looking combinations of these, like fruity, trippy trees. And as the seeds, so what we're selling with Moonglade, we are selling seed pouches that kind of are what these guys are planting. And if the tree takes, if it survives, 10% or so die. If it survives, then it gets kind of revealed. We have this reveal mechanic with Remark NFTs. It gets revealed as one of these combination trees. So completely unique artwork. And every sale that we do actually helps fund. So we've paid in advance to RMTerra to do this work. And so we're recouping costs by selling these Moonglade seeds. And the better the return, the more we can do this in the future. So that's basically it.
So what happens if yours doesn't grow? Are you just left with the pouch?
If it dies, you get a spirit tree. You get a ghost tree.
Oh.
So that's kind of like in this nether world of desaturated treedom. It also looks really cool.
That's pretty awesome, and what a great effort to be working on. So I would be remiss to not mention our friend of the podcast, Donnie Big Bags, who mentioned you last time we had him on the podcast. He was quite a trip. He was pretty excited about all the stuff going on in the space, and definitely mentioned you guys. Have you had a chance to work with him or talk with him? Like, do you guys have a relationship with him at all?
Yeah. So Donnie's a big Remark whale, one of the biggest. He's all in on this. He actually started as an NFT skeptic. Didn't care for this at all, with good reason. You had nothing to care about in NFTs before Remark. And so once he learned about the NFT 2.0 functionality that we enabled, it just clicked, and for him, faster than others. And so now he's building like 3 NFT projects based on this technology that are going to blow away Sama. And it's no secret that we've had trouble reaching outside of the Sama ecosystem in terms of like marketing and just generally being pushed forward by the powers that be. And so Donnie is a like a force to be reckoned with in terms of social interaction and reach. So having him on board and having him so deeply invested in Sama and invested in just spreading the word of what the technology that we're building in can do is extremely beneficial. So yeah, we work with Donnie pretty closely. He is involved in a lot of things that we do. A lot of his team actually started as artists on Singular, so there's a lot of connection in between the two teams and the efforts. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, he certainly does have quite a reach, and I always enjoy the content he puts out.
It's also like with Donnie, you can be sure that whatever theory that is crazy he puts out, he might do, he's absolutely gonna do. Like
yeah.
we're preparing this land sale for Skybreach, and we were talking about just urban centers, and then maybe then there's going to be a huge bits of common land, like common being the most common land in between these urban centers and something. And he immediately recognized the potential of that and said, like, all right, that's it, we're building Las Vegas in the desert. And so he's like he already knows what he's going to do there. And I know it's going to be crazy, and it's going to be crazier than we who are building Skybreach have imagined. So it's really good to have such a aggressive shipper on board in this ecosystem, because sometimes it feels a little drowsy, and when we get these people who are like shots of caffeine for the entire ecosystem, it's super cool.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm sure you guys try to incorporate feedback from folks like that so you can keep that going. Well, I've certainly been super impressed with everything. As you probably know, like Kraken has definitely been one of the few businesses that's been pretty heavily invested in Polkadot and Kusama, and are really serious and believe in the future of the technology. So I really appreciate you coming back on and explaining some stuff to us. Is there anything that I missed that you'd like to maybe bring up? I like I said, I know you have a ton of stuff going on. Anything else you'd like to promote?
No, just I would love it if more people would join us on Singular. The marketplace now supports minting NFTs that can be placed and equipped inside of each other. There are games being made where you customize your avatars. There are whole music collectives that are now minting music albums that are one NFT with different tracks that you can listen. There's so much going on. I really want just people to come in and explore with us and tell us what doesn't work in terms of UX so that we can make it better. And also, if you want to join us in the metaverse revolution, the Skybreach land sale is coming up. So everybody who had a Canaria, if you're listening to this, do not miss out, because you got free land. Check your inventory. Do not forget about it, because that expires. So join us, don't miss out, build with us, and let's build a decentralized future and true metaverse together.
So where would be the best place for people to go if they have not started on this at all? Like where should they go? Where can they learn?
So for Singular, just go to singular.app. If the app is not intuitive enough, we have failed, and come yell at us in Telegram. And for Skybreach, just go to url.rmrk.app/wiki for the entire wiki about Skybreach. Every single bit of information you need is in there. Or just go to skybreach.app, and that's going to also work.
All right. So singular.app or skybreach.app, you said?
Skybreach.app. Yeah. Sky BREACH. So not bridge, but breach. Yeah.
All right. Great. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, thanks so much for stopping by again, and we look forward to hopefully having you on the cast next time when Remark has surpassed NFT 1.0 and everybody's excited about having adopted the Remark technology. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks again to our guest, Bruno. It was great learning more about Remark. Make sure you like, subscribe, and review us on your favorite podcast platform, and we will be sure to bring you along as we get a backstage pass to the world of Parachain auctions. Until next time, I'm Brian Hoffman, and this has been the Kraken Parachain Auctions podcast. This content is not financial or investment advice. All interviews and discussions are opinions only. Kraken does not endorse the accuracy of this content. None of the following information should be construed as a recommendation to support any specific Parachain project or to participate in Parachain auctions in general. See our terms of service for more information.